Okay, so we all know that turnout comes from the hips. If you didn't know that, if you thought turnout comes from your knees, I'm so happy you're here. Your knees are a hinge joint. They have a small amount of turnout available, but turnout comes from the hips. And if you've been teaching that turnout comes from the knees, today's the day we get to change. Turnout from the hips is a really difficult thing to teach beginners because they don't see what's happening inside their hip joints, but they see their feet. And so we get a disconnect where students think that turnout is the feet going sideways like little duckies instead of an action happening inside their hip joint. Another visual that is good for kids that is kind of easy to apply because a lot of people have straws. So you take your straw, like obviously this is how we use a straw, but you take your straw, pretend this is the leg. It's a really long foot, but that's okay. Here we are in parallel. If we think about turnout going this way, you can see in the straw, like that's a kink. That's not good. That doesn't feel good for the straw. But if we take our straw / leg with the big long foot and we turn out at the top, so we turn it at the top, then ta-da, we've turned out the leg. The whole thing goes in one piece. That's a visual that kids can connect with pretty easily. Most of them have straws. Water bottles get kicked over in my classes all the time, so there are always straws around. I do have a plie that I use for my level 2 dancers. I call it level 2, you might call it level 1, you might call it level 5, you might call it the peanut butter level, whatever. This is for kids who are usually about 9 years old. They are turning to use one hand at the bar for the first time. If you don't start your beginners, your littles, with 2 hands facing the bar, I really recommend it. It does a lot of good things for them. So that's why these kids are about 9, 10, 11. This is not their first year of ballet. They know what a plie is. So now we get to move to the next level beyond just, oh, plie, bend, stretch. Like, we're going a little bit deeper into their technique. The plies that I use for my level 2, first time one hand at the bar, about 9-year-old kids, I do this plie for their whole first month. And I usually see this group about twice a week. I prefer to work with them for twice a week. An ideal class time, in my opinion, for this group would be like an hour and 15. So they do this plie exercise 8 times before we plie on our feet. So we start on the ground, laying on our backs with our legs straight up in the air. How much you want to focus on pelvic alignment is totally up to you. It depends on the way that you prioritize and organize your syllabus. It depends on the strength of your class. It depends on the flexibility of your class. I usually don't worry about it a ton. I'll do a little bit of like adjustment and aligning and getting all of those core muscles closer to the standing stance, but not a lot. And this is why. Their legs are going to be straight to the ceiling, because if they start to go out this way, then their attention is going to switch into their abdominal muscles that are now working, and we don't have full attention on sensations in the hips, right? So this is one of those times when you have to prioritize, but don't stress how the lower back, waist, pelvis is all related to the ground too much, because you need them relaxed enough to be focused on their hips. Okay, so here we are, we're on the floor. You're gonna lay down on your back, legs go up to the sky, turn out to your first position. I flex my feet, I have my students flex their feet, mostly because we point our feet so much in dance that, like, let's just give them a break. But here we are. Put your fingers right into that little hip crease here. And then nice and slow, you demi-plie, 1 and 2. Keep your feet against an imaginary table and rotate parallel, 3 and 4. The amount of leg, the shape of the leg touching the fingers is different than it was before. Go ahead and notice how those legs move. 5, 6, and then we straighten 7, 8. We do it 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can encourage your students to bring their fingers around into where it's a little bit more hollow. 1, 2. It will feel different there. Right now I'm kind of pinching my own hip bones because the movement is happening so deep we can't actually palpate the part of the body that's moving, but we can feel the muscles that are closest to the movement point. And that really helps kids understand. I only do the 4 demi-pliés in first position. We don't do second, we don't do fifth, we don't increase it to 8 because I don't know if I'm just freaky or what's going on, but I can have my legs up in the air for a long time and feel fine. But a lot of children start to feel discomfort, like the blood is leaving their toes and they start to get pins and needles and they get uncomfortable. They're not unsafe, but they are uncomfortable. And so I choose to stop it after the 4 demi-pliés just because I don't want them to be distracted by that pins and needles sensation when we stand up to do the next exercise. The reason I have them put their hands on their hips is because I want them to be able to feel the hip joint. It's really difficult to bring sensation to an area that like you are unaware of without touching it. It would be like if I showed you a new texture, you know, like you'd never see, like for example, a Buddha's hand. It's a kind of fruit. I saw one in my grocery store. We don't usually get them here. So if you saw a Buddha's fruit and I was like, okay, imagine what that feels like. Okay. But if you touch it, then you have a much better understanding of what the texture is. And the imagine, like when I saw the fruit across the grocery store, well, okay, fine, across the produce section, you know, I imagined what it felt like, and I wasn't that far off, but that tactile connection just gave me a little bit more understanding. And I have more luck with kids when we're working on building somatic awareness, when we can touch, we can touch the part that we're talking about. It just helps them make that connection a little bit quicker and a little bit more accurately. One of the things that we lose track of as advanced and professional dancers and teachers is how hard it is to gain that somatic awareness that we just take for granted. If you ask me how my hip is feeling, I can tell you how my hip is feeling. There's a reason we can all sit down and tilt a certain way and the hip pops, but most of our beginners can't do that. And especially your hyperextended kids, your hypermobile kids tend to have a worse self-perception because their joints are moving through a greater range of motion, but their nerves are not any longer than the person standing next to them. Like they really don't have a great sense of where they are in space. So just because someone can do amazing things with their arabesque doesn't mean they know where their turnout is coming from, or they can sense when they are turning out from the hip versus the knee. And we need to be very, very careful that we are developing somatic awareness alongside vocabulary so that our students eventually gain the ability to self-correct and throughout the process are more inclined to do things safely. I do eventually prompt the kids to look at their feet, but I don't have them look at their toes. I have them look at their heels. Again, this is just my experience, but I find that when kids equate turnout with how far their toes went to the side, that's when they're more prone to bend their knees and crank things inside their knees and crank things inside their ankles and then like straighten it and then their butt sticking out all weird. I'd like to take the focus away from the toes. One of my favorite turnout exercises that I start the year before this actually has the kids standing in parallel, bringing the heels together. And so in order for you to have kind of a context that the kids have, I'm going to show that to you. So we do it 2 hands facing the bar, and we press up and down. We do 3 of them, but I'm going to save you time. And then they rock back onto their heels, open, toes straight down, no extra wiggles. Up and down. Again, I do it 3 times. Not going to put you through that. And then our heels go back. That motion there, the toes staying and the heels going, is really unfamiliar to a lot of kids. It also starts to wake up like right in through here, which is fantastic. This is a point to make sure that they're doing correctly, that they're keeping the toes and moving the heels from the beginning. 1 and down. 3 of those. Flex, turn out, no wiggles. 3 in first, parallel. We go 3 here. This takes a lot of ankle strength for some of those beginners. So sometimes I split this into half and we don't do the second half until after the new year. We do our 3 here and then we come back, no wiggles, quick check. Are you as turned out as before, or did your heels not quite make it? Super common for their heels to not quite make it at first. Heels make it. And then to finish the phrase, because I don't want to drive myself crazy, 3 press rises, back to parallel and finish. The kids already did this turnout exercise with me the year before, so we build on that idea and we watch the heels doing the moving. And then that way it takes something we did last year and it connects it to what we're doing now. And it also takes the visual away from the toes. Because honestly, when you're doing a tendu devant, you want the heel forward. When you're doing a plié, no matter what direction it is, you want the heel forward. So I try to spend as much time as possible on the heels and how the heels are moving. So there you have it. Again, I only do this for the first month, but I do it for the entire month. The kids are not a huge fan of it. It's okay. You know, when they say, when can we stand up for pliés? I always say in October, because I always started in September. And it's, you know, they're like, oh, okay. And then October comes and the 2 that really didn't like this are super excited that it's October, which is kind of fun anyway. But I do it for the full month because it takes practice to learn how to sense and be aware of a new part of your body.